So can't change my vote now, it's on the recording.
Ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay, I'd like to call the Budget Review Committee to order. It's May 19th, 2025. We're in the Aldermatic Chamber, and the meeting has been duly noticed in two places, including the city's website, in accordance with the requirements for RSA 91-A:22. The clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Tim Senate,
Here.
Alderman Derek Theobald, Alderman John Sullivan, Alderwoman at Large Rashana Kelly,
I'm here.
Alderman at Large Laurie Wilshire,
Here.
Alderman at Large Michael O'Brien is present, and our chairman, Alderman Richard A. Dowd.
Present.
Okay, you have 5 members present.
All right.
Also in attendance is Don Enright and various division directors.
Okay.
And the word for
If they come up, I'll record their name.
So.
Yes, and Alderman, oh, you stayed? Okay.
Hey.
All right. I figured you might have had something better to do. All right, we have Alderman Tom Lopez
And Trish Clee.
and Alderman Trish Clee.
Okay. The first item on the agenda tonight is a discussion of trust funds. And I'm going to recognize Treasurer, Tax Collector Don Enright to come up and take one of the seats. And there is no public comment in the first part because there is no action being taken at tonight's meeting. Anything we talk about tonight would have to be passed at the full board by legislation. Is that right?
Thank you. Dawn Enright, Treasurer, Tax Collector. First off, I just want to make sure that everybody has a copy of the trust report. If anyone needs one, I have a couple of extras that I could. Okay, so in front of you this evening, I have pulled together with staff a listing of all of the trust funds within the city's preview. These trust funds are set forward in the same format in which you have seen previously, Mayor's Office, Human Resources, Pension, and so forth. Within each of the categories, you will see that there is a fund number, 1, 2, 3, so forth, beside them. So it might be easiest to recognize them in that fashion to be able to find them when you have a question. Each trust fund has been given we've identified the purpose in which the trust fund was created for, the way it was created, whether it was through resolution, or if it's a ordinance, a charter, a directive, or a private directive, which would be either through a will of some sort or a donor's directive. And in all of the directives that are given, you're always given an agent to expend. These are the individuals that are responsible to give the final okay in order to spend those funds. The last column that is shown here is managed by. This is within the city, the area that has been designated to manage these funds because it most fits their functions within the city. So when you have a question about a trust fund, I would recommend that we direct those questions to the managed by personnel, and they would be able to answer the direct questions about them. From there, there is a second section of this report that gives you the balances of each fund as of March 31st, as well as any revenues that have been received or expenditures that have been expended out of each fund. You will also see anything that is encumbered, already accounted for with an ending balance as of March 31st. So that is how the report is being presented. I think at this time, I would welcome any questions that you may have about any of the funds, and we will be happy to answer any of the questions.
So just want everybody to know that if we determine something needs to be done to one of these, it's going to have to be done by legislation. Legislation would have to be written and brought back to the full Board of Aldermen, not the Budget Committee. Okay, and I think we probably ought to do this by the expendable authority.
The managing.
Right, and then if there are questions, so as we go through each one of these, I have a couple other questions. One is, as you go through the financial part of it, let me just see if I can find that wording to make sure it's right. That's not where I want to look here. So there's interest, and then there's transfers. I have that other report. And there's interest earned, but then there's also some places where there's an unrealized gain and loss.
Yes.
What is that?
The investments on a monthly basis will have unrealized gains and losses, and according to GAAP, we must record those throughout the year. So it's not a recognized gain or loss, it's unrealized.
All right. And also, on a lot of these funds, I see that there are bank fees
Yes,
or agent fees that
yes.
we have to pay. My concern when I went through it is that there are some of these trust funds that have so little money in them, it's costing us money to keep them open. Is there an administrative cost for keeping each one of these open?
There is, the costs that are being allocated are in relation to the balance to the account.
Okay, so relative to the different spending authority divisions, they need to decide whether it's something they need to keep open or not. And I noticed some of these have not expended any money in a long time. And if that's the case, is there any reason we need to keep it open?
I would note that under the managed by, several of the departments have made recommendations to
Yeah, I see.
close.
It's in the notes here.
Yes, under the managed by, if the managing department or division has recommended it to be closed, I have noted it after their department name.
So before we get started, is there anybody on the Budget Committee or the Alderman that have any questions before we get started? Alderman Kelly?
So I know that if we close some, there are certain ways that we have to go. We might have to do legislation. What happens to the balance of the money that's in those if we close one?
That would be part of the legislation.
Will we choose, or we can choose? I know that there are a lot of strings attached to some of these funds.
It depends on how the fund was created, if it was public funds or private donations, how we would actually close the account, but we would have to take each one separately and make that determination.
Follow up?
We decide we want to take some action, it's going to have to go through legal.
Follow
Follow
up?
up?
Just over the top, if it were, and if it's public funds, okay, that makes sense to me. If it were private donations, do you have a sense of what that would look like? Would we have to reach out to the donors, or?
If it's private funds and the use, the purpose of the fund is no longer obtainable, and it's a significant amount of money, we can go through the process of SIPRE, which is through the Department of Justice, and request the change be changed to a more modern purpose. An example of that is the Weaver Hospital Fund, which is in public health area. We are already talking to legal to get the documentation together to go to Cypre for that one, because I do not believe that we can open a hospital for $900.
Anyone for ants.
Just, we don't think so, but we believe that there is a use for those funds for public health, and we're working with Bobby Bagley right now to give us some direction as to what she would recommend that we move that money towards in her public health realm.
Thank you.
So, any other questions before we get started? Alderman Clee?
Thank you. Just 4 letters. Fairly simple. So I do have a question specifically about the number 88, the PNR.
Well, we're going to go through each one, so.
Yeah, I'm just using it as an example. That's why I said specific to that one, where that one was kind of like a court-ordered one. So that one's a different style of one. So my question is something on that nature, not necessarily this specific one, but on that nature where it's a court order, so it's kind of a slightly different one. If that were to go to 0, something like this were to go to 0, where some of the others have gone to 0, I know we would have to do legislation to close it out or something, but where this one was established through a court order, can that remain open and used if where we could use it to put funds in that were for donations for that same type of a project or something of that nature? Or is it where this had been kind of a court-ordered type of thing, or it had been set up for a specific reason under different circumstances? Can something like that be used? Or do you have to close this up and we'd have to do something else? I know it might fall under legal, so it puts you under certain circumstances. So that's kind of a gray area, so thank you.
Thank you for the question. So something that is not a resolution that is approved by the board, we would have to go to the original document on how it was created, this case, the court order, and that court order, we would have to make sure with legal that everything was fulfilled according to that order, and then we could close that fund.
Follow up? So in this particular case, if everything was done, then we couldn't continue to use the fund if other monies came in. We'd have to create a whole nother fund for those other monies, is what I guess what I'm asking for. Yeah.
Thank you for that question. You wouldn't be able to put
Okay.
anything else in that. The trust funds are very unique.
Right.
And they have to be used for the purpose and the purpose only in which they were created. As I stated, especially this one, because it was a court order.
Right. Very
We would
different.
have to fulfill the court order and then close it. We cannot take donations into it, and the only way you can change anything that's private is through the Cypre with the Department of Justice.
Yeah, this one is very unique. So,
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
Thank you.
Follow up?
Thank
You're
you.
all set?
Nope, thank you.
Alderman Senate?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had another just broad question before we get into the nitty-gritty of these. And just by way of an example, I'm going to pick on the same fund that Alderman Clee just brought up. When we consider appropriations that we make throughout the year, whether it's supplemental or budgetary, I know in the whole discussion of these funds, and I think it wound up being a bigger list than many of us anticipated. Do we know now, just sort of as a baseline practice within the city, how much this is being looked to before we make considerations for those appropriations? Is it common practice for the different expending agents or departments who control these different funds to say, well, okay, again, just picking on the Greeley Park, okay, we want to make some improvements to Greeley Park. Do we have funds in a trust fund to be able to do that before we go, again, budget or supplemental appropriation?
I thank you for the question. I would have to state that, yes, the departments know the trust funds that are within their preview, and they do consider them. You have two boards that are very conscious of all, I should say several, that are very conscious. Your cemeteries and your libraries, they are very conscious of absolutely everything that is in these trust funds, and they utilize them. The other departments do look at theirs, and as you can see in the budget, we do have transfers from trust funds into trust funds, and so we do take these all into consideration. I will state that I think no matter what process we have, there's always room for improvement, but I think in a general sense, I could say full-heartedly that yes, the departments and divisions take into consideration the funds that are available through these trust funds.
Follow-up?
Just subjectively speaking, as you compiled this
Yes.
and got really knee-deep in the weeds, any surprises that stuck out to you?
Thank you for the question. Surprises that stuck out to me, there are a lot of them. The magnitude was very interesting to see when you actually started compiling all of the information. Individually, not really. There was one resolution that was passed in 15, and we still have these to close some accounts, and they're still on our list and on our books. So that surprised me. So that's noted here, and I can promise you they will not be on the books any longer.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Okay, I think what we want to do is go through by each category that you have on here
Certainly.
and then go down the list and say, is it something that they need to keep open? And that should probably end the discussion there. We have a lot of these to go through, so I don't want to get into the minutia on every single one of them. We'll be here for days. So unless there's a specific question relative to what it is, or we should or shouldn't get rid of it, the first people we want to ask are the people that are controlling those funds. Having said that, there are a number that are $0 and haven't been used in a long time. So somebody is going to have to make a justification, I'm going to assume, even to this budget committee, as to why we keep those open. Okay. Question you forgot?
Nope, just
Alderwoman
anyone.
Kelly?
I would just request as we go through, I wish it was compiled together so I could see how much is in each one, but it looks like they're separate. So if we might be able to just, I don't want to sit here talking about something that has $100 in it, if it's got $100 in it.
She knows how much is in each one.
I know she does,
One
I'm
minute.
asking
And
that we talk about it when it comes up.
That other report has how much is in it at the end.
I wanted to make one additional comment, if I
Yes.
may.
Oh.
If it does not show on the expenditure report, it has a zero balance. So the ones that have a zero balance, example number 17, which is Green Team Trust, account 7023, you will not find that on the trust fund balance because it has a zero balance.
Oh, okay.
Okay?
Alderman Senate?
Thank you. I just wanted to echo the previous speaker's, I guess, request for the way this information is compiled. And I don't want to undermine the information. This information we've been asking for a long time, and it is very clearly concise here. But if this information is available in any sort of manipulatable form, spreadsheets. I really like spreadsheets. I can take both the balance sheet and this and pivot them myself, but if that were available, that would make this significantly easier to go through, especially as we're being constricted in how we're going to discuss it. It's kind of hard to go back and forth between page 3 and page 11, and, you know.
Oh, yes, is
I
that
can
right?
appreciate that comment. I do have it all on one spreadsheet, and I printed it. You would have needed a magnifying glass to be able to read it. So if you would like it in electronic form, I'd be happy to share it.
That would be great, thank you.
With the whole committee, please.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, yes. Yep.
Thank you.
All right. So I think we start going through these and see, and hopefully we can go through them quickly. If in your own mind, Alderman, if you have something that you want to get rid of or requires legislation, if you want to work with Dawn to get that legislation written through legal, have at it. But it'll all have to come back to the full board. And it should be, you know, if the expending authority really wants to keep it, there better be a huge overlying reason for getting rid of it if they want it, and there's a reason they want it. So, having said that, we can start off. So, do you want to call them, Dawn, or Mayor's office, the first one? Megan, are you speaking
Yep.
for the mayor's office on this one? Come up and just take a seat. It's probably a pretty short one. Is it right, do you want to call them out one by one, or you?
It's up to you, like you said, and for the record, Megan Karen, Chief of Staff. It's pretty short. I guess I can give a brief summary of our department. Really what we're looking at is the city events and the multicultural festival. So city events, there are 3 events. This houses sponsorships and donations. So it's for the Nashville Pride Festival, the Gen Expo, which was the inaugural Gen Expo was this past March, and then the Summer Stroll. And then when you jump down to Fund 7585, the Nashville Multicultural Festival, that's donations and sponsorships for the Multicultural Festival.
So I guess the question at hand is, does the mayor's office feel that these 4 or 5 should stay open?
Yes.
What were the account numbers? I'm sorry.
I'll go by line. It's number 2 and number 4 that I spoke to specifically.
That's what I was looking for. Okay.
So does anybody have any overlying questions or concerns? You'd like to close one of these for some reason, or do we need? Yes, Alderwoman Kelly?
I thought you were going to ask the question at hand, which is mine, which is, we have a city event line and a multicultural event line. Could we get rid of multicultural and fund it out of city?
That's a good question. My first thought would be that the funds in that particular trust fund were donated for that particular purpose. So, and I will let Dawn speak to this, but at the most, I would say you would combine them and create a sub-account into city events. But again, that's not my expertise, but
Dawn, is that going to add additional accounting because you won't know what was spent on what unless you keep track under one account rather than having 2 accounts?
Because we're taking donations, you would want to keep it in a trust fund, not have it in the general fund. Is that what the question
No.
was? I'm sorry.
My question was, why wouldn't we just put them together? Because the Pride event, we take donations for, and it's not city event line. Like, why does the multicultural of all of our events have its own?
yes, okay, so I understand your question.
Sorry.
Really? No, really what it comes down to is timing. So city events was created first for Pride. Then the trust fund for the Multicultural Festival was created. However, in the last year or so, the Summer Stroll and the Gen Expo were the first-time events. And so at that point, it was, you know, we know the narrative around trust funds. let's stop creating a trust fund for every event. So that's why that's why Multicultural Festival has its own. So we kind of backtracked into, these last events, the newest events. It just made more sense to put them into city events as a sub-account rather than to keep creating trust funds for each.
To combine any of these, you're going to need legislation. You'd have to talk to legal about how you could do it, and the wording would have to be such that you could combine them. And I don't want to get too much into the minutia. If that's something you want to investigate, you need to talk to legal.
I understand, I'm just asking, the point of this meeting is to find out if there are multiple funds that are not needed, and we have sub-accounts in city events, so it doesn't sound like it would be not feasible to move it over. And it's the beginning of the meeting, so I'm asking the questions.
It appears that both of these were set up with public funds and to accept donations, so it is something that could definitely be explored.
Thank you.
Alderwoman Clee?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that there was a reason why it was created separately, and the reason was that there had been donations to the multicultural events that got lost. And there was a little bit of controversy about that, and so it kind of came through, and there was a lot of hurt feelings and so on, so it was created because donations were claimed that it didn't get quite into the right pot and so on. And I remember that
All set.
conversation.
I don't want to get into too much detail on these, or we'll be here for days.
I'm just saying that.
I know, we got your point, though.
Okay.
Alderman Senate?
I got enough.
Okay. Any others on the mayor's office? If not, we'll move on. Thank you.
Thank you.
No point.
Human Resources has one. That's part of a collective bargaining agreement, so I'm not sure there's anything,
And
We can do on that
under the Human Resources one, that is managed by the Administrative Services. So maybe we could have Director Cummings come up and speak to any of the Administrative Services at this time.
Good evening. Do you want me to approach, or you want me to do it right here?
your choice is only one.
No, there's several.
Oh, we're gonna,
Yeah, I think I could probably do this
Oh, you should-
quickly
you want- yeah, I wanna-
if we do
you can
all
sit-
of the ones related to admin services.
yeah, why don't you
Okay.
take a seat then?
All right. Good evening, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Tim Cummings, Director of Administrative Services. I think what may be best is if I just go through each of the particular trust funds that the Division of Admin Services has some sort of involvement with. And then after I do my quick synopsis, happy to take questions and answer specific questions as they arise. So first and foremost, if you note, the mayor's office went, and the mayor is the agent to expend. However, the Arlington Street Community Center does have a trust fund. Now, I want to note that this trust fund was set up originally to take donations. I think there should be a conversation to occur sometime in the future about maybe changing the purpose of this trust fund to be a little bit broader than just donations as it was currently written. But nonetheless, the reason why it was created is to support the Arlington Street Community Center. Next, moving down, and to the reason why I'm up, Mr. Chairman, as you note, we have the Human Resources, the /UAW Educational Assistance Trust Fund. This is a contractual obligation that we have, and it is essentially to help with professional development and tuition assistance for UAW employees. Next, I want to just note that we have the state pension ETF. This is, I look at as like a savings account or a trust fund that we use to support us when necessary for when we have to make a payment to relative to pensions. Next, if you skip on down, you will see City Retirement Trust Fund, similar to the state pension employer trust fund. This is essentially a savings account, if you will, where we use this when we have retirements that are in excess than what we've budgeted for, and so when we need that, we tap into this to this trust fund. After that, you'll have the capital reserve fund, the very next item listed. Administrative services supports financial services in this. We play a little bit more of a secondary role. I think everyone is very familiar with what SURF is, but essentially it's our major source of funds for vehicle purchases. Next, we have the City Fuel ETF Trust Fund. This one may not be as common to everyone, but it's similar to the other trust funds, as I mentioned, which are, it's more as a reserve fund for us, a savings account, if you will, if necessary. If fuel is higher than anticipated, we have a source to tap. Next, you have the Energy Efficiency ETF. That was created more than a decade ago. It is essentially, as I understand it, a trust fund that was created particularly for building improvements that had energy efficiencies to it and projects of that nature. This would be one that I would note that might be worth a conversation about closing. I wouldn't want to do that in a vacuum. I would want to involve the sustainability group and community development in that conversation, as I believe they may have some sort of interest in this trust fund as well. Moving on, you have the Nashua Center for the Arts Trust Fund. This trust fund is a capital reserve fund to help with deferred capital maintenance and alike. And that was a newer trust fund that was just set up. Next, moving down on the list, you will see a 14 Court Street Trust Fund. This is a newer trust fund created, which is, again, just to help with the 14 Court Street building with deferred capital maintenance. You have then a City Buildings ETF. This is a citywide building trust fund to help with deferred capital maintenance and various building projects. Then lastly, you'll see a City Hall Renovations Trust Fund that was set up. I would recommend this one closing. I believe it's a zero balance one. I believe it was created during COVID when we had some major City Hall improvements underway. Then you have the Hunt Building contributions, which is another trust fund under admin services, and it's focused on supporting the deferred capital maintenance and building improvements necessary at the Hunt Memorial building. So those are all the trust funds, I believe, except for, I want to note, admin services was noted for the lecture fund series at the end. And I am not overly involved with this, but as I understand it, these are funds set aside to help with various lectures and whatnot. With that being said, those are all the trust funds under the purview of admin services.
What about the Green Team Trust and the,
That would be community development, I believe.
okay. Questions, Alderwoman Kelly?
You made a mention of Arlington Street Community, maybe shifting it so that you could accept, is it other types of donations? Would it need to go to a different, like an enterprise fund?
No, if I may, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, go ahead, Director Cummings.
In speaking with legal, it would need to be broadened to be a little bit different of a trust fund so it can accept like fees and whatnot into the trust fund.
Great, thank you.
Other questions? Okay, was there anything else on that list that we missed that you didn't? Oh, the others are going to be community development?
Pretty good, Mr. Chairman. I think I did this in record time.
All right, so all the ones you related to all should stay in place.
Except for the ones I've noted where it might be
Where
worth
you
a
said
conversation.
close,
Yep.
Yeah, took note, okay. So in the community development, do we want to entertain Director Sullivan?
Excuse me, can I ask a
Oh,
question?
question?
One? Can we, I know you're going to send us your spreadsheet. He mentioned a couple that he wanted to close that aren't listed as such here. Can we update those? Like you said, ETF, that doesn't say close. And you said City Hall buildings, that also doesn't say close
Yeah,
next to it.
and if I may.
Yes.
The energy efficient one, I think, has $1.70 balance in it. And
That's why I had it flagged.
the City Hall renovations does not show there. It has a zero balance.
Well, we still would need to do something to close those. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Director Cummings?
Thank you.
Okay. Now, the others under community development, do we want to bring up Director Sullivan?
attempt to go a little faster than Director Cummings did. I think he was a little slow there. For the record, Matt Sullivan, Community Development Division Director. I'm going to go generally in order of the information included within your packet. I'm going to cover certainly the community development directly related funds, but I'm also going to cover a few, perhaps even within Public Works that they'll speak to later this evening, but just express support for maintaining them. But to start off, Fund 7062, the Energy Efficiency Fund, this was actually mentioned by Director Cummings. I do welcome a conversation about the use of that fund and keeping that fund moving forward. Director Cummings is absolutely correct that the balance is limited. It has been a destination for certain energy related expenditures, or actually monies coming into the city, and could be used in the future if we want to have a location actually deposit monies from energy rebate checks or the like. That's a conversation that we've had at some level internally and at some level with other members of the public about the idea of being able to accept monies, put them in there, and then expend them for a specific purpose associated with energy efficiency. So our recommendation would be certainly a conversation with Administrative Services, but likely to maintain the fund moving forward as at least a housing mechanism for those monies. Moving into 7063, this is the Waterways and Water Body Fund. This is sort of in the, I would say, the yellow category, where we would like to maintain it, but we certainly recognize that a conversation may be in order to remove it moving forward. This was actually intended to hold grant awards for the Waterways Department. The Waterways Department no longer exists as it was consolidated into the Sustainability Department. Like the Energy Efficiency Fund, however, we would welcome the opportunity to maintain the fund simply as a destination for grants or other monies that might come in, but certainly recognize that there would need to be a conversation about where those monies would be expended to at the time that those monies come in. But again, happy to have a conversation about removing this one if that is necessary. Treasurer Enright mentioned a fund that was found to be eliminated several years ago. These are funds 7023, the Green Team Trust Fund, and 7567, the Green Team Contributions. These were actually eliminated via 014-003, so there's no need to address those during tonight's report. Those two funds have been eliminated and will be removed from the list by Treasurer Enright. Fund 7064, this is one that you all know and love, I'm sure, very dearly. This is our Hydropower Reserve Fund. This is where we've actually come to this body and the Board of Aldermen to have monies allocated for various expenses at the Mine Falls facility and the Jackson Falls facility. Most recently, the interconnection agreement payment. We came to you all and requested monies to be placed into that. We often, through the operating budget or through the escrow process in previous iterations of the budget, put money into this so that monies were available for emergency repairs and other expenses at the dam. So obviously, moving forward, this is a fund that we would like to maintain and feel quite strongly about that. And Ms. Chisholm is here this evening as well if there are questions specifically about expenditures that come out. A few others, our Housing Revolving Fund recently changed over the last year to be from a Housing Trust Fund to a revolving fund. That's 7068. This is the source of funds that it was the $10 million that was allocated through the ARPA process several years ago. These monies are being expended actively. We've made 2 awards, actually 3 awards in fact, and are likely to make awards over the coming years, and the Housing Revolving Fund Committee is working diligently to do that. So please maintain that fund moving forward. Fund 7086, this is the BIDA fund. This is the Business and Industrial Development Authority. They obviously maintain site control per the Board of Aldermen authorizing to do so of 2 parcels in the Mill Yard. And as you know, BIDA has worked actively over the years to lead redevelopment of the Riverfront Landing property and are hoping to do more redevelopment projects in the future. These monies are available to them so that they can do due diligence, do site design, and expend other monies in the interest of catalyzing redevelopment in the context of their state authority. So we would ask that that fund be maintained as well. One fund that's not in the report, and I expect there is a reason for this, but I just wanted to note it. You may remember over the last year that we established a Community Benefit Energy Fund. This is the destination fund for the Community Power Coalition adder monies. If you remember, we have an adder charge that's charged to ratepayers across the city of Nashua that's then routed into an account with the Community Power Coalition. The intent is to use those monies for projects that benefit the community generally and very specific targeted efforts to improve energy efficiency and energy education across the community. That's not shown here, but certainly it's something we want to maintain. It was just recently established, and we're actually proposing in the fiscal 26 budget to move monies from Community Power Coalition into that fund. And then finally, I wanted to touch on a few that are outside of the Community Development Division The first being Fund 7057. This is the East Side Recreation Facilities Fund. I expect that perhaps Director Photo and her team will speak to this evening. This was a fund that was established as part of some of the work in the East Hollis Street corridor and some of the redevelopment over there. But particularly, it was established to create additional opportunity for green space and recreation on the east side of the city. Over the past 2 years, there was actually a resolution to reallocate some of those monies. But I think this is an appropriate time to note for the record that when this fund was created as actually part of a planning board process, the intent was to make a deliberate and intentional investment in green space in the east side. That has not been done, I think, to the level that we would like. And so I think there's real reason to maintain this fund moving forward, despite maybe the lack of expenditures over recent years. It certainly should not suggest that there isn't a need, but in fact, it may be a signal that we need to refocus our attention on creating additional recreational capacity in the area that the monies were intended for. Fund 7532, in fact, this is the last community development fund. This is an urban programs-based fund that was created to incentivize the creation of affordable housing. I would suggest it's been replaced in many ways by the Housing Revolving Fund. And so Fund 7532, I would recommend eliminating through the appropriate action. And then very finally, I'm going to rattle off a bunch of numbers, but I'll be quick in summarizing them. Later in the book, in Funds 7514 through 7521, 7523, 7530, 7531, you don't need to write these numbers down. These are all planning board related traffic or sidewalk or corridor mitigation funds. These are critical to the work that Director Photo and her team do, certainly in the Public Works Division. But these are often the housing mechanisms for contributions that developers make to the city of Nashua to allow for additional sidewalk, corridor improvements, signal timing, or other work to be done. Some of them are quadrant-based, some of them are smaller scale than that, but I would recommend having all of these remain in place moving forward, even those that are hyper-specific to things like Somerset Plaza and Northeastern Boulevard. But if there's any disagreement, I certainly defer to the Division of Public Works about those very specific ones. But generally, these funds have a purpose, and we would recommend maintaining them moving forward so that those improvements could be done as part of the planning board process. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that folks may have.
As I recall, those last ones you mentioned all have funds in them.
They do, with the exception of 3, and we should confirm this, but I believe 7522, 7587, and 7581, those being Somerset Plaza, Northeastern Boulevard sidewalks, and data communication improvements, those are zero balance, but I really want to defer to Director Photo here in the sense that although they may be zero balance, if a project ever were to occur in those areas, I'd want to hear what DPW's perspective is on whether those should be maintained moving forward. But I just flagged them because they did have an intent when they were created. It was deliberate, and it may be worth a conversation about them moving forward.
Questions? Alderman Senate?
Thank you. East Side facilities or recreation facilities, you had alluded to this specifically in relation to the East Hollis Street corridor. I can't quite glean from the description of that, but is that specifically for that corridor, or is it specifically for that general area on the east side of the city?
Alderman Senate, there's actually a specific geographic extent defined on a map, and I'm happy to share that with this committee as a follow-up action to this evening. But it's not the East Hall Street corridor itself. It's actually a broader area that was contemplated as part of a land use discussion, and I'd be happy to share that figure with the group.
Yes, thank you. I would appreciate that, because I know that that's a conversation that's happened in here before in regard to the, I guess, the rate of development in that general area comparative to the number of green spaces there, and it's only going quicker. I mean, the facilities on East Hollis Street, I know they're not near completion, but they're en route to completion in the old Henry Hanger building. There's an approved plan across Temple Street. Whether or not that ever comes to fruition, well, that's anybody's guess. There's 3 or 4 new facilities or facilities in process along Bridge and Canal Street. So and it looks like that fund has a really healthy balance in it. So whatever it takes to get the ball moving on that, I think that that's something that we should have en route to completion alongside these housing opportunities as they open up and fill up, because otherwise we're gonna have a bunch of new neighbors moving in looking for places to passively recreate.
All set, Alderman Sen?
Yep.
Alderman Kelly?
Thank you. I'll start by saying that there's no prize for whoever talks the fastest this evening. That being said, I followed most of yours, but you were jumping around, so if we could get your list, that would be amazing. The second question I have, well, the question I have, there are a couple that you recommend flagging for closing, or there are some maybe we keep it. So I guess this is for Director Enright. Do we have any administrative burden for keeping open a trust fund that's got, $1 in it?
Thank you
that
for the
right?
question. So your question was, do we have any, I'm sorry, directive that says we have to keep it open?
No, I'm wondering if there's any cost involved with like keeping one open if it's not currently being used.
No.
Great,
No.
thank you.
Unless there's money in the bank, then they have bank fees. Any other questions for Director Sullivan? And Ms. Enright, by the way, there's various ways of funding these resolutions. It can be by court order, it can be by donation, it can be by, when we get grants, some of these get funded by the grant money. We transfer it from I think we transfer from the general fund into the expendable trust fund, and resolution. So like during the budget, the alderman can put money in something. I think I covered all the ways. All right, thank you, Alderman.
Thank you.
Director Sullivan? Is anybody here from the cemeteries?
What cemeteries are here?
Oh, all right,
They're here. Do you
So-
like Woodlawn or is?
that's
or
the next
Edgewood?
group, right? We did the Hunt Building, so it's Pinewood, Woodland, Edgewood.
How about Woodlawn Cemetery?
I don't know if you really want us to go through anything. There's 6 line items here. The description is typed out right there. I don't know if you want me to sit down and read it to you, but any questions?
If you could just give us an overview of the trust funds that you have and the general reasons you have them.
Okay.
I think some are donations, some are, but you use all of those funds. So you want to give us broad stroke and then
Okay.
see if anybody has any questions.
The first one, 7502 Pinewood Cemetery Maintenance Fund. Pinewood Cemetery, it's money for the purpose of doing some maintenance on the property. The second one is the Perpetual Care, which was for maintaining the cemetery lots. Then Woodlawn Cemetery, Maintenance Fund is the first one, 7506. To maintain the properties, the buildings, the roads, the water systems, et cetera, equipment. Then the Perpetual Care is to maintain the cemetery lots, all the lots that are there. Then the next one is arbitrarium for raising, planting plants to have for us to take care of the cemetery. That was donation, as it states here, and by Gidges years ago. And then the Jenny Wallace Fund is a fund that was a donation for us to place flags on graves for the Civil War soldiers on Memorial Day. That's it in a quick nutshell.
So broadly on all the cemeteries, the only city funds you use are the employees' pay.
Usually just our cemeteries, just Woodlawn and Pinewood is us, and
Yeah.
the funds are used for there, and we pay for our employees out of our fund. Doesn't
Oh,
cost the city.
okay, so there's okay,
Except for benefits.
benefits.
By the law, the benefits have to be paid by the city. By state law. by state law, but
Okay.
everything else for the cemetery is paid by us managing
Right.
it with our investments and paying for our equipment, salaries, wages. Doesn't cost the city anything except for the minor part, the benefits. So I think that we're the only department that, in the city that does that.
Any questions for them?
Anything to add?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. All right.
Edgewood Cemetery?
Hmm?
Edgewood Cemetery?
Edgewood.
I don't see anybody here.
Hey, Karen? Other duties is assigned?
Karen Smith, Business Manager, Nashville Police Department. So I'm going to go out of order. I only have a few, but I think it would be better explained if we jump down to number 43, which is the 7511 Police Law Enforcement Program. And the description on this is donations, gifts, contributions for non-specified law enforcement. That account was created after we had 4 or 5 others that were specific donations accounts. So I would recommend, if the board wishes, to go ahead and close on 39, 40, 41, 42, and 44. Those are all specific. And we would keep just the one, which is what we are using right now. The others have very minimal balances. That account, and then moving up to the top of our list, the only other 2 we have is 37 and 38. 38 can also be closed. That's an older account that we're not using anymore. The only other account we would want to keep open is number 37, which is 7080, which is our overtime account, which, if you're not familiar with, I can go into more detail. That's the account that we use to offset the budget that we have for overtime is underfunded due to the plan that we do for vacancies. It was something that the Board of Aldermen actually created for us years back to help offset our budget.
Okay, and those ones that you recommended,
To keep just number 37 and number 43. The others can be closed. Move the funding if you want. There's a minimal amount that could go into the other donation account.
so for Ms. Enright's edification, where would you want those, if
The
that action
donations-
is taken, where would you want the money?
They're donations, so they would go into the primary donation account that we're keeping, the 7511 account, line 43.
Questions on the police department? That was easy.
Thank you.
Thanks. Ms. Enright, fire?
Fire Department?
Good evening, Steve Buxton, Fire Chief. The first account is 7032. This is the Fire Emergency ETF. This is the fund that we utilize for unforeseen fire emergency overtime. It assists us in, similar to the police department, in the, if the budget is tight for emergency type overtime. And there's roughly $169,000 in that account. And then the next one is 7512. This is the Fire Rescue Public Education Injury Prevention Program Fund. This is where we place donations and stuff to help further our education and injury prevention programs within the community. And that is roughly, I believe, about a $10,000 balance at this point in time. And then the final one we have is 7030, Amherst Street Fire Station ETF. And the purpose of that is for future development of the Amherst Street corridor and the potential to help fund the building design of a station in that area. This was one that we weren't aware of, that was brought to our attention. I believe there's zero balance in there at this time. And I think it would be worth having a discussion if we kept that open or not.
Okay, if you did keep it open, what would the use be?
If we wanted to utilize that to get developers to make contributions into that sort of an account for the future development of a station out on the Amherst Street corridor.
Either that or review it and maybe replace it with a more precise piece of legislation. Questions for the fire department? Oh, Alderman O'Brien.
Yeah, Chief, why limit to the Amherst Street corridor? I know in the back of my mind, we want to do something with other stations. When it's coming forward, it's the Pine Hill Road station. So where this is more involved with the potential of buildings, can we make it more general citywide?
I would be open to any conversation that you'd like to have on that topic. Like I said, there's a zero balance in this fund now. We weren't even aware that it existed, but I'm hesitant to say that we just close it out, that it's not a good idea. It was obviously created for a reason at some point in time.
Questions? Perhaps, we could investigate looking at a different piece of legislation to replace this and that has more leeway for accepting things across the entire fire department. All right. Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
Public Works. Yes.
Good evening, Lisa Photo, Director of Public Works. I did not know we were going to be presenting all of our trust funds this evening. I probably would have been a little bit prepared, but I'll do my best. We have a lot, so please forgive me. I'm not going to do as well as Director Cummings did, but I'll do my best.
Slow is better.
7035 is an asbestos trust fund that we have, and I would recommend keeping that. It's something that we use particularly for licensing and training of our staff, because we do have a lot of asbestos throughout the city, so that's important. I'm going to take some of these developer contributions that are improvements for various corridors in the city together. And I would recommend keeping them. We have one for Broad Street, Amherst Street, Searles Road, West Hollis, Northeastern Boulevard and Main Dunstable, Pine Hill Sharon, Main Street. East Hollis Street is a pedestrian safety, but again, from developer contributions, and Whipple Street, and I guess Lake Street as well. So I would recommend keeping all of these. They do all have fund balances within them. And they have been, we do expend from them, and they have been particularly helpful in those, when we're doing work in those corridors, when we're trying to do safety improvements. So, the next are the sidewalk construction. We have sidewalk funds in different quadrants of the city, northeast, northwest, southeast, and southwest. It seems, and some of these seem like they have a fair amount of money, but sidewalks are very, very expensive. So this funding does not go a long ways. People have asked, well, couldn't we combine them? We certainly could do that. The reason they were set up this way is so when work was being done and developers would make a contribution, that that contribution would stay within that quadrant of the city. That's why it was set up this way. But that could be changed. DW, the next one, 7569, DW Highway, Spitbrook Road contributions. Again, this is one that we use frequently. I would recommend closing 7522, which is the data communication improvements. I don't think we necessarily need that. I think there are other ways we can do that. I would also recommend, and it has a zero balance, we also have the Somerset Plaza funds. I would recommend closing that. That has a zero balance. And some of these are so specific to areas that it would be very difficult for us to use them. So, and then the Northeastern Boulevard sidewalks, I would close that one as well. The, let's see, BPW escrow, that is not, I don't know what that is, to be honest with you. I don't know if it's a zero balance, so close that as well. The snow removal trust fund that we have, that is for funding when we have extreme weather conditions and need additional funding outside of our operating budget. I would definitely recommend keeping that. The street paving fund 7040, I would recommend that we close that. We don't need that. That was established for funding street paving. We now, of course, are bonding our street paving, so we no longer need that. 7580, this is for the purpose of accepting donations for paving. That does have a balance, and I would recommend keeping that in the event that we have developers that want to contribute to street paving for various reasons. I'll move on to solid waste, with your permission, Alderman Dowd.
Yes, go ahead.
The landfill rate, the closure trust, that is by permit. It has about $9 million in it. We're required to keep this balance in order for the eventual closure of the Fort Hills landfill. 7002 is the Solid Waste Reclamation Trust Fund. This is established by, we take in some motor vehicle fees, some revenue into the solid waste fund, and this is for only motor vehicle waste. This can only be used for things like motor vehicle batteries and tires, things like that, motor oil. I would recommend keeping that. That's something that we've had for quite some time. The Solid Waste Equipment Reserve Fund, I would recommend closing that. That we had something similar to what we call WRF with our wastewater fund, but we moved solid waste into SURF, so that's no longer needed.
I want to cover, I guess you skip the Parks and Recreation.
Now I'm going to move to Parks and Recreation,
Yep.
if that's okay. Do you want me to do that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So Holman Stadium improvements. The Holman Stadium, Mine Falls, and the David Dean Skateboard Park are all cell tower funds that we use to maintain these facilities. I would recommend keeping all of those. The 7056, the sports tournament travel, is established for sports tournament travel. Like, for instance, if Little League went to the World Series, it would be to help some of the kids to attend. Recommend keeping that. The East Side Recreation Facilities, that really is not Public Works. Director Sullivan spoke to that a little bit. Would recommend keeping that, but that isn't something that Public Works is really involved with. 7058, Park Rehabilitation, that is for the funding of our parks, and there are many, many needs. That doesn't have a huge balance, but would definitely recommend keeping that. The Jackman Fund, that was by a probate court order. Mr. Jackman left us some money. It doesn't have a lot in it, but it is a good account to have when we desperately need something and we can't fund it through our budget, because as you know, Parks has a very small budget. 7551, Summer Fund, that's to accept donations for our Summer Fund program. It's pretty self-explanatory. 7573 is Rotary Common, the Labyrinth. That's for accepting donations for the purpose of preserving that. I would recommend keeping that. 7575 Rotary Common, the Art Wall, I would recommend closing that. That no longer exists. The art wall has been removed. That does have a fund balance, so we would have to determine through legal what to do with that money. It's got about $7,400 in it. 7579, the Holocaust Memorial Maintenance. That is, of course, just to maintain the Holocaust Memorial. It doesn't have a huge balance, but I would recommend keeping that, as I think we could get additional donations to help fund that. 7060, baseball field rehab, it doesn't have, it has a zero balance. I would recommend closing that. Baseball field lighting, again, I would close that. It has a zero balance. The Jeff Moran Fields at Roby Park, I'm really unsure why that was created, and I can't even find any legislation that created it. So, and that has a zero balance, so I would recommend closing that. And I think that's it.
That's it.
Any questions?
Questions for DPW? Alderman Senate.
Thank you. I had a question under Public Works and Engineering regarding the various funds for contributions from developers. I know that's a really common caveat for site plans and such being approved upstairs at the
Yes.
planning board.
Yes.
And I'm wondering how this all sort of breaks down, because for the number of caveats that are imparted upon those developers, it seems like there's less than there were. So do these sort of cover like a broad area? Like I'm thinking very specifically here, the intersection of Crown Street and Arlington.
Yes.
Real nuisance intersection in Ward 7, and one that I know was recently targeted for receiving some contributions from the development that's happening down the bottom of Crown Street. Would that fall under something like the East Hollis Pedestrian Safety, or would that eventually become its own ETF, or where would that money land?
That is the one problem with these. They're so specific to where the funds can be used, so they would not be able to, we don't have any funds for that area.
Wasn't that a, like, part of that getting approved, though?
Part of,
The development down on Crown Street that's being built right now, I was under the understanding that part of that site plan approval was a contribution for the improvement of that intersection.
there may very well be, but it's not listed here.
Okay.
But there may be a new one, yes.
So that's what would happen with something like that?
Yes,
is
then those funds could be
a
used,
new-
absolutely.
Okay,
Correct.
so right now that fund doesn't exist, but presumably once they open and make that contribution, it will.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
Somebody will
That's
probably
correct.
be looking-
And that's a very good example, Alderman Senate, that these, and that's why Director Sullivan also spoke to it. These are really important, because when things like this arise, we're able to pull from these funds and take care of some of these issues.
You'll say somebody's probably going to be looking for a sponsor for that legislation. Alderman Senate.
Yeah, just as a follow-up to that, so if something did exist already, like I know there was, I'm not going to find it right now, but if there was one, I believe there was one that was very broadly Daniel Webster Highway improvements, and I know that was a contribution that the Nash Casino had to make. Would that just go in there, or is every last contribution got to become a new trust fund?
If there was another contribution for DW Highway, it would go in there.
All right, so
Yes.
it's really just dependent on how broadly specified it is at the planning level? Okay, thank you.
Alderman Clee.
Thank you. I have mixed emotions about having so many of these very, very specific type of things, and being on the planning board, much like what my colleague said, I was there when that got approved, and I want to make sure that the monies that are specific to that project, that says those bump outs and that all of that is going to happen as was promised. And whether it be that the developer themselves do it, or that engineering does it, or that the city makes sure that that happens, however that happens, I want to make sure that that happens. So whether it's through this kind of funding or however we make it happen, we make it happen. But my concern is that we start creating all these funds, and then we have all these little amounts in it, and then we can't use it. Being on the planning board, I also see that we have too often a lot of in lieu ofs. Sidewalks aren't really being built. We're doing a lot of in lieu ofs because we're doing these building sidewalks to nowhere. So rather than doing this, we're creating these funds so that we can build sidewalks where we really need them, or we can rehab sidewalks that need to be done, or maybe we can put sidewalks in corridors on Main Dunstable where children, or New Searles, where children are walking to schools and where we need them. And I know that's what the ultimate goal is. So I don't want to see too many of these accounts. So I think what I'd like to see is that maybe the Daniel Webster one, or this one in particular, is kept, but that we really look at the ones that we have and say, do we need these anymore? Is there going to be more purposeful, meaning building in this area, or should we get rid of them and then if needed, we recreate them? I just hate to see even small amounts of money just sitting there. Because there's so many in lieu ofs. I sit on the planning board and almost every project is an in lieu of. This particular one is very important. I don't want to see this one get dropped. So to my colleague to my left here, absolutely positively, I 100% agree with you. I voted against that project, but I want to make sure that if it's done right. And I don't want to see it get lost, but at the same time, I don't want to see all of these little projects and so on. So if we can really take a look at all these sidewalk ones that we have and all of these, and not have so many, any ones that we can get rid of, whatever sponsors we need, and really take a hard look as to whether or not we need any of these particular ones.
I did mention to close, that I think a few
Yes,
should
you
be
did.
closed because I think they're very specific. But I think the ones listed, and I think Director Sullivan would back me on this, I think these all have value because these are all areas where we would like to do some transportation improvements. So, and there's also the opportunity, I think, to get additional contributions in some of these. So I think that they have value.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Senate?
Just a quick follow-up to that. In regard to something like Crown Street, where that's not here yet, but I believe it's my understanding, and Alderman Clee can correct me if I'm wrong, that that was a condition of approval. Who is responsible for making sure that actually happens? That those funds come in and that eventually that legislation comes looking for a sponsor?
That would be the Director Sullivan in the Planning Department.
Want to address that, Director Sullivan?
So Matt Sullivan, Community Development Director. So what you're seeing on this list is a mixing of two systems, an older system and a newer system. We use a system now where we have bigger buckets. We have larger areas that we're putting monies into. Whereas the older system was these very micro level areas or specific extents or project areas where monies were being deposited. So that's why you see all these very large and very small funds. The way that it works now is there's really kind of an off-book accounting. So there's no need for legislation, in fact. So when the planning board stipulates that a given improvement has to happen, the engineering department and director of photos teams identifies the cost, what's appropriate, and a contribution is made into the corridor fund or the quadrant fund. That money goes in there, and there's sort of a, let's call it an earmarking that happens, that those monies will then be deployed for the specific improvement that was required as part of the planning board process. But there's no need for legislation to then deploy those monies to that improvement because of the way that these funds are set up. So they're really kind of a holding mechanism in many ways. The one exception here is some projects don't have a very specific requirement to build something. They're asked to make a partial contribution, essentially. If you have a 2-lot subdivision, you're not going to be asked to build out the entire sidewalk on a street, obviously. That's not reasonable. But you will be asked potentially to make a contribution to that fund. In that case, those monies are sort of cleansed of being tied to a specific improvement, and then they can be deployed anywhere across the corridor. So every project is a little bit different. I think we do have some cleanup work to do, but I think Director Photo said it well, that the current funds, I would suggest we maintain. I think this is something we should look at moving forward. I know there's been many conversations here, Alderwoman Kelly and others, about increasing contributions and the amount of funds that are going in. We certainly know that's a priority. I know Engineer Hudson's looked at this as well. So maybe that's a conversation we can have over the next year at the same time. Thank you.
Yep. Alderwoman Kelly?
I mean, Director Sullivan sort of spoke to my question, but my question around the sidewalks is it feels like they're very restricted. You can only use it in that area, or so. Is there a scenario where a bigger bucket, like he was just talking about, might allow you to deploy that money as you see the most.
Wherever it's needed? Yes.
Correct.
Yes, I would support that. I'm just not sure. I know that the contributions were accepted for those specific quadrants, so I'm not sure that can be done, but yes, that would, if we could add all of these together, it would be a significant amount of money, yes.
And if I could follow up.
Follow up?
So, this is one of my favorite things. I love this pay in lieu of sidewalk issue that we have. As I remember, some of the projects you're putting in and they're like, oh, we don't really need it here. I can think of one right down my street. So keeping it in that area, does that make sense if there's a reason why they're not putting them in?
I guess, I'm sorry, I don't understand your question.
Sometimes the project does the in lieu of because they're
Yes.
not necessary.
Correct.
But then you're putting it in a fund that says we could only put it in that quadrant.
Right, correct.
Okay.
No, I would love to see one big sidewalk.
Great.
Something
Me too.
probably ought to look at it, developing a new piece of legislation that gives them a broader spending authority, and maybe even, again, through legal, see if those things can be transferred into that and get rid of the old one.
That would be my preference, if I could do one more follow-up. You may not know the answer. I know you said you came and you weren't sure you were talking to all of these, but I was wondering out loud, and maybe this isn't your question, if we've looked at the payment amount that we're asking for sidewalks and compared it to other cities, and if we're on the low end, the high end, what does that look like?
You know, I'm not sure we've ever really done that analysis, but that's a good point and something that we should be looking at, and I can work with Director Sullivan on that.
Thank you.
Sure.
I think they're doing a lot of sidewalk work up in Manchester right now, because they're in terrible shape up there.
Well, and my biggest problem has always been we're always putting in less than we could actually do to do those sidewalks, so we're always putting ourselves at a deficit.
Right. Any other questions for DPW? Thank you. Let's see. And next up is the library. Go ahead and identify yourself and
Good evening, everyone. Jennifer McCormack, Director at the library.
And Linda Laflamme, Chair of the Library Board of Trustees.
okay.
And Jen's trusty computer that's booting up. There.
Well, I was in danger of running out as fast as people talked. I should have plugged in ahead of time. So we have a number of trusts. I did want to kick things off by saying the first one on your list, which, bear with me one second, the line 89, 7048, historical books and materials. That fund was established when some library employees wrote the second chapter, the second volume in the history of Nashua. So Nashua Experience was published before I got here. I would recommend that we close that. We haven't made contributions to that fund, I don't think, in the 15 years I've been here, and there is no plan to print a new history of Nashua that I know of.
What is that? What number is that?
It is 7048. Yeah.
number 96 on the left side.
Well, I have it as 89 on my list, so I don't know.
89?
Maybe I have a different list than you.
Could be.
So going down from there, the rest of these, with the exception of 7549, library miscellaneous library donations, those are all bequests of one kind or another. Many of them are restricted, as you can see. I think there are 10 or 11 that are unrestricted. We spend from most of those funds at least periodically, some of them quite regularly. The Bloomfield Trust being one that we use quite often. The Clancy Trust was used this year. Or it might have actually been last year for the, for some carpet purchases. The Stearns Trust is our largest one that's used for the purchase of reading materials. And that's used to pay for some of our fees for the New Hampshire Downloadable Book Consortium. We use that to purchase books that we give away at community outreach events. We use that to purchase multiple copies of the National Reads title every year. The Zalonis Fund we used to use annually for a major program when the Lithuanian American Brothers and Sisters organization was active. That organization is no longer active. I do put flowers on the Zalonis grave every Memorial Day, but that does not dwindle the fund by very
No.
much.
It is a requirement of the fund, but it does not dwindle. And in the past, we have done language classes, we have done cooking classes based on Lithuanian heritage, as well as sent some people there and purchased their paintings when they came back. But it is getting harder and harder to find substantial ways to spend that trust down.
What's the balance in that?
Over $1 million.
Yeah.
So
But that's.
the money being spent is less than you're getting on interest every year. So I think we need to find a way to expend that money or it'll never be used.
Right.
We have had very preliminary discussions on potentially looking at Cypre for that.
The Library Miscellaneous Library Donations Trust, we use that quite often, so that's one of the primary uses for that is when the Friends of the Library are purchasing something for us. For instance, they bought some tables recently. The library purchases the tables out of that Miscellaneous Donations Trust Fund, and then the Friends make a donation back into that fund to make that whole. We use that for other kinds of equipment, we use that for programming, we use that for refreshments, for staff development. It's kind of a multi-purpose fund. The Burbank Trust is another rather large one. That's restricted to the purchase of works of art by living artists. And Linda can speak a little more to this. The board is actively working on establishing a new set of policies for that, for having the Burbank collection appraised.
The Burbank Fund is an interesting one because it has its own, I guess you could call it subcommittee, the Burbank Committee, which was designed to be expert advisors, folks who were experts in art. That subcommittee has had a somewhat tumultuous relationship and history. And it was disbanded in 2005-ish, I think was the last time. 2005, we had a consultant in that was paid for out of the fund, but who did a good report, which is a good balance, a good basis for moving forward, but that committee couldn't see eye to eye, and so it was disbanded. But Jen has been doing yeoman's work on coming up with some new guidelines. We just were discussing it at the last meeting, and we're committed to trying to get that moving forward again. And we have some exciting ideas of how it might possibly be spent to benefit the city. So while it's been dormant, it's coming back to life, I think is the best way of putting it.
So happy to answer questions.
Questions? I don't think we went through all of them, but I noticed that several of the library funds have well over $1 million in them. And I haven't, and I was just looking to go back in the one report I have to see when there were expenditures done. If we have an account that has over $1 million in it and no money's been spent in it, then we probably ought to look at what we can do to spend it. Not all at once perhaps, but somehow change the legislation. If I saw the one was by court order, we can't do much with that. But some of these accounts are quite large, and when you have several $1 million in one of these accounts, I'm thinking, yeah, you could replace your IVAC system with part of that money. You also have some that say buying reading materials. Well, that definition has changed since these things were originally generated. So now you can talk to digital books and.
Which we are.
Yeah, okay.
Which we are. In fact, you hit on a point that we've been talking about ourselves, which is that thank goodness it doesn't say simply books. Like there's, I can't find where it is in here, but Harkaway is, I mean, that's a small one, but it's specifically children's books. Now, we can probably broaden that to ebooks, but we have been looking at some creative things like that. Our philosophy is as long as it is the reading materials themselves, whether it is an ebook, a paper copy, what it is, we can expend it. The question that we run into nowadays is, what about platform fees for these ebooks? For example, long ago we said we would pay for books, but not bookshelves, because those aren't reading material. So is the platform fee closer to being the reading material, because without it you can't access the data? Or is it closer to being the bookshelf? So it's an interesting question that we have to answer, but we are very much looking at trying to find ways to bring some of these very historic funds into the more modern era. And this year, was it the periodicals, online periodicals? We shifted some from the book line in the budget into the trust.
Yeah, so that was, we were paying for some of our platform fee, or some of our content for the downloadable book consortium out of the regular book budget. We shifted that all to the Stearns Fund. And I think our biggest trust funds are the Stearns Fund, which we regularly spend $60,000 to $100,000 a year out of. The Zelonis Fund, which has become very difficult to spend out of. And the Stearns, and the Bloomfield, which we regularly spend out of as well.
I noticed some of the expenditures on a yearly basis are less than the interest that are being earned on the money. When you go through this analysis, do you get a legal interpretation as to what can and can't be spent?
Yes, we do. There's an attorney on the Board of Trustees. And then for other questions, we refer to the Charitable Trust Division at the state.
Okay. Questions for the library? Alderman Clee?
I don't know if this is for the library or for Dawn. I just happen to be looking at 754, am I doing this right? 7546. I see that there's 2-point-some odd million dollars, but I can't find the description of it. I see 7543 and I see 7547.
Which, 7546, were you asking about, Bloomfield?
Yes.
106, line 106.
Oh, it's
Oh,
line
line
106.
Yeah, that one, Bloomfield is unrestricted.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay, I'm sorry, I guess I just, okay, so it's line 106.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions?
Oh, I'm sorry, I do have
Yes,
another
Alderman
question. Thank you so much. Relative to, and I apologize for my ragged thinking, relative to the definition, as you were talking about books versus ebooks and so on, these definitions were created by RSA, which would be state law, and so on. If you needed to have it redefined, would you then have to go to the state and ask them for redefinition? Is that what?
I think Don could probably chime in on this as well, but I think our practice would be to go approach the Charitable Trust Division and ask for their opinion.
May I do a quick follow-up?
Yes, go ahead.
I think more a suggestion than anything. I think that would probably be the better way, because everybody's got to be in the same boat as far as that's concerned, because we're all kind of going into the same ocean of of change and so on. So rather than trying to just keep paddling and trying to figure this out on our own, I would think it's probably a good venture to kind of go to them and say, hey, things have changed just a tiny bit. Rather than trying to struggle, I think it would be, especially when we see some of these larger funds, so that you can use them in the best possible way. So, just an opinion. Thank you.
Other questions? I noticed some of these that you had, the first chunk that you said that you use periodically. Like there's one there from Marion Fairfield. She was my pediatrician when I was a kid. I mean, that was set up decades ago. Is that really that restrictive, or?
You were a kid decades ago.
I'm not sure what your question is, so, but I wonder if the confusion or the lack of clarity has to do with, we would never spend the whole principal,
Yeah.
so we would only be spending the interest? Is that what you're seeing?
No, I think there's about 17,000 left in, if I remember that number correctly, but it was set up for something, say, 40, 50 years ago, maybe even longer. And has I would think by now it would have been totally expended.
Well, and I think my response is, we would try to spend the interest when there's enough revenue built up to make a meaningful purchase with that, but we wouldn't spend the original invested amount. So it would never go to zero. But I feel like, I'm not sure we're talking about the same thing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Treasurer?
Many of these funds are restricted in terms of only spending income and not being able to spend the principal balance. So this would be the situation with that one. You can't spend the principal balance.
Okay. Any other questions for the library? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Let's see. We covered economic development, right, Tim? Oh, no, we didn't. Economic development. I was looking the wrong side of the audience.
Liz Hannum, Economic Development Director. We have a few funds here. Most of them are, actually all of them are frequently used. We first have the Downtown Improvement Fund. That is the fund that the Downtown Improvement Committee uses to do beautification projects, cleaning, events, the lights for Christmas, the holidays. And the reason that this is a trust fund rather than just an account is because they often try to make strategic purchases that are much larger than what they would have left after their operating costs for the year. So we try to kind of roll over some of that into the next year so that we can do things like buy a new star for the tree lighting. Or this past year, we did all of the planting beds on Main Street all at the same time. So those are much larger purchases that need to be kind of saved up for. So that's that one. The Downtown Redevelopment Initiative, that's it's for the purpose of purchasing or acquiring new parking or property. There's about, I think, 380,000 in there. And we haven't used it much because there hasn't been a lot of property available. And two, the property that is available is a little bit more expensive than 380,000 usually. So we are trying to figure out how to use that appropriately. We can also use it as a parking maintenance fund, but we have been trying to use the parking fund, which is back on the parking operations. So it's 7085. So we've been spending down on that for maintenance and planning, getting ready for the parking renovations. That's the fund that we've been using for that. But this Downtown Redevelopment Initiative Fund could also be used for that. We have spent a lot of the money out of the parking operational fund. And so this is kind of our, if we have a major maintenance issue, this will be kind of a backup plan for that. That parking operational one, we get revenue from the parking fines. Fees and permits all go into the general fund, and that helps us to do larger maintenance projects and future planning. But so we recommend keeping that 7084. You already heard about the BITA fund from Director Sullivan. That is recommended to be kept. And then the Economic Development High Tech Expo is a $0 balance right now, and we haven't hosted that event for a long time, so I would recommend closing that one. And then the Urban Affordable Housing one, Community Development manages that, and I believe that they would recommend closing that one as well. But those are the big ones for economic development.
Questions for economic development? Senate.
How flexible is that downtown redevelopment initiatives?
It is fairly flexible, but based on the legislation, it is primarily for acquisition of property. And then we can kind of use it as maintenance on the back end. So it might be flexible.
I guess I'll ask the $13,000 question, which would be, given that a lot of the revenue and impact goes to the parking division, is that something that just theoretically could be used for the placement of the barriers?
I don't think it is, because it's more maintenance. The language is around maintenance if we're going to use it for something else. But it's certainly something that we could look into.
Okay.
The other thing I would say is the parking operational fund and this fund might be able to be combined as we move into the enterprise fund, because we wouldn't need them. We would have our own enterprise fund long-term. So those two might be able to be moved into the enterprise fund at some point.
All right.
Alderman Lopez.
Figured I should say something. The downtown improvement fund that you were talking about, could it be used to fix either broken or unnecessarily exotic streetlights? Like maybe giant globe ones?
Yes, so that is certainly something, the Downtown Improvement Committee makes recommendations to the mayor for how to spend that money. And so that's something that the Downtown Improvement Committee, it could be proposed as a project for them. Yes, it could be used for that.
And that's the account where we put the 100,000,
Yes.
How much is it every year?
The 100,000 every year.
100,000 every year into it?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
And that's what I was talking about. There is 100 that goes in there every year, so it could technically be just an account that we use, but because of those larger purchases that we try to do strategically, it has to roll over.
Okay, follow up, Alderman Sanders?
Yes, I'm back on 7084 again.
Yeah.
The Downtown Improvement Committee is also listed as as at least part manager of that account as well, same as the downtown improvements one. So would any expenditures from that need to sort of go to them for review, or?
It wasn't quite clear in the legislation, and so I think that is, it would be something that we would want to run past them, because as you know, the Downtown Improvement Committee was originally funded out of parking, and so that the parking acquisitions were going to be managed by them. And so it's changed a little bit because it's now just a general allocation. Do we want, yes?
Man in the back. Director Cummings.
Thank you, Tim Cummings, Director of Administrative Services. I was here when this legislation and trust fund was created, so I thought it might help to provide a little additional context as to why this trust fund was created. It was actually created at the behest of the Board of Aldermen, because what we did was we sold a parking lot to the hospital. And from a GFOA perspective, you never want to necessarily lose a capital asset. And so they wanted to house the money in reserve for when there would be a future opportunity to buy additional parking, and that there would be readily source available funds. Otherwise, you could potentially dwindle your assets down by not necessarily looking at it in that very strategic way. So I wanted to provide you that context so you had that. That was actually something done by the Infrastructure Committee back in, I want to say, 2016, 2017, with the East Hollis Street parking lot that was eventually bought by the hospital for something like $340,000-ish.
Question, Alderman Clee?
Thank you. That kind of goes to my question. And while I would have no problems putting the money into parking, because I think the funding could go in there, especially like for maintenance of the current structures and so on. But this very specifically says, much to what Director Cummings just said, it's for the purchase of property. So I can't see how it could be used for anything other. We could maybe kill this trust and close it out, and then possibly put the monies over there. I just can't. I mean, obviously we have the ability to do that, and so on. But I would still like to see, because we've discussed at times. There was a little tiny parking lot that at one time we discussed purchasing, and so on. So I would like to see that fund stay there in case something like this ever came to be, for us to purchase something like that. It would be funds that would be available without having to try to dig up that money. And in all joking aside, there was, as Director Hannum can vouch for, there was a small parking lot that we were hoping to try to buy that would stop some controversy and so on. I'd hate to see this go away, because there could be other situations that could come to.
Yeah, and if I could just, the downtown parking study also recommended adding about 1,000 parking spaces in the next 10 years.
Yeah.
And we're already about 3 years past when that recommendation came. And so I think keeping this fund open specifically for parking purchases, we will find a use for it at some point. Well, we just have to wait for that right property.
All set, Alderman Clee?
Yes, I
Alderman
am.
Clee?
Thank you. Sorry.
Yes, Alderman Lopez.
2 questions. I'll try to be quick. Well, 1 comment, actually. First, I think either President Wilshire or even yourself were on the board. I believe that the Downtown Improvement Committee initially was just an advisory body, and that we were still running any of their proposals through here until maybe a couple of years ago, when we said they could actually designate it. If anybody recalls that, that might be why some legislation or funds don't explicitly say they should be managing it. I don't know if anybody remembers that. And I guess the second question is with regards to the creating more parking spaces. Some examples might be painting stripes on streets that don't have parking on them, like if we add parking to the Water Street Bridge, discontinuing roads that might be somewhat redundant, like when a school closes, for example, to create parking spaces. Are those things we can do that you don't have to buy the property, you just have to modify it?
I think that is potential, because that would fall under maintenance. And so that is a potential. I think that the legislation had a specific like geographic area, so it may not work in some other areas that you're talking about, but I think that that's a possibility. So we can certainly look into how we want to use this fund.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Other questions? Thank you.
Thanks.
Now,
Public health?
I think we've already covered
Public health.
lecture funds, so we're going to school department, right?
We have public health as well.
What?
We also have public health. We missed.
Is that, did we miss that going through?
Yep. Line
Okay.
76 through 81.
Public health? Where's this? Dr. Bagley?
Good evening. For the record, Director Bagley for the Division of Public Health and Community Services. And we have, there's 4 under community health. The first one is the one that Director Weaver, Don talked about, with the Weaver's Union Hospital Fund, which is one that was established a number of years ago for the purchase or building of a hospital, which we are looking at developing some language legislatively to change that for the use under community services. So that fund currently has, it's 7524, and it currently has about 9,000, a little over $9,000 in it, which we could definitely use to support. If it were initially designed for a hospital, which would be healthcare, we could definitely use it to support some of the needs of members in our community. So we're working on legislative language for that. So we'd like to keep that open. 7526 is the Chairman's Fund for the Board of Health. This was originally set up by the Board of Health members. When they would get their stipends, they would actually put them back into and establish this fund. We do want to keep this open. This is currently being used to support the development of the Board of Health and to pay for their conference attendance and their membership under association, so we would keep that as well. The other two, 7525 and 7527, the Charlotte O'Harris Fund and the Community Health Child Care Program. There's no money in either one of these. I believe at the time that this child care program was there, we actually had a child care program that we ran out of 18 Mulberry Street that was very specific to child development services, and we actually had a public health nurse that did that work as well. So there's $0 in there, so there's no reason to keep those two funds.
Close both of those.
Yes.
Okay.
And then also under our division is welfare, which is the 7042, which is the Welfare Trust Fund, which we do want to keep that open. That was established to, it's the expendable trust fund that was established to help cover costs for general assistance provided through our welfare department. And this fund, as you know, is definitely needed. There is a current balance in there of about $84,000, which is usually used to cover overages when the welfare assistance budget is over expended. And then there is 8036, which we found out we had the Welfare Sarah Wallace Fund, which has been in existence since 1917. This fund was established to assist poor children and those who are destitute of proper homes. There is a non-expendable principal balance in this fund line of about $60,000, and then there's an expendable balance of about $17,000 as of March 2025. So this fund hasn't been used in many years. However, if we could develop a process by which these funds could be spent, we would like to keep this trust fund and then be able to use those funds for the purpose of which it was established.
So, needs modification to the legislation, or?
It needs, there's not a designee to spend the funds for this one.
I noticed that. That's a change to the legislation right there, so I
Yes.
would assume.
Dawn Enright,
Yes.
Treasurer Tax Collector. Thank you. This fund was a private donation, so we will have to research the original directives more clearly and possibly get interpretation by either legal or by the Department of Justice.
Okay. Questions for public health? Alderwoman Clee?
Again, not for public health, but for Dawn, and it was something that I had noticed. All these that do say unknown as far as the agents, that means we don't know who has the right to expend those. Is that the case?
Thank you for the question. Yes, a lot of these are very old documents, and we are still researching to get the original directives, and we're working with Department of Justice to get the original directives and determine the agents to expend.
Follow up?
Yeah, so in the case of the Weavers and so on, where we want to close that out and then use the money for another, obviously, this would be a question for legal and so on. They would have to find out who, in fact, could actually do that. And so, I mean, I know it says managed by, but it doesn't say who the agent is, whether or not it's the Board of Aldermen or whether it's the mayor or so on,
Certainly.
that would actually have the right of legislation to do this. Is that correct?
Just for clarification, are we still talking about the Sarah Wallace Fund?
No, I'm talking about like 7524, where we talked about potentially closing that out and taking those funds and using them, repurpose them as Director Bagley had
We're
had
actually
mentioned.
looking to file cypre on that one through the Department of Justice.
Okay.
And get a, change the purpose, staying within the original intent of the directive.
May I-
Follow up?
So that won't need legislation.
Okay, but in that case where it talks about the agent as being unknown, we would also then at that same time have to then define an agent at that time
Yes,
for the new
correct.
purpose. So, okay,
All right.
that's okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Alderman Wiltshire?
Just an observation that in 1892, there probably was not a public health director at that point, so.
Yeah.
It's actually here at City Hall.
I'm sure that'll all be taken care of under the legal action.
All right.
All right, yes,
We have one other one that Public Health would like to address.
okay.
All right. And that falls under other government funds, which is the opioid abatement trust fund. And this fund, this trust fund was actually set up as a result of the settlement through the opioid abatements through the state, and the city of Nashua actually also pursued a settlement. And so this funding is used in accordance with an RSA that was established by the state for the services that we provide for intervention, treatment, and prevention of those that are in recovery. And so we want to keep this trust fund open. There will be continual dollars contributed to this fund over the next, I want to say 15 years now. And in addition, we use the money that comes through here to support some of our nonprofit organizations that are providing these services, as well as some of the activities that are actually done out of our Division of Public Health and Community Services in response to opioid, homelessness, and mental health issues. And so we want to keep this fund open.
Question?
What line is that?
That's
70.
at the beginning, it's first page.
8,
Oh.
it's line 8.
Number 8, 7024.
Number 8, okay. Thank you.
Questions? Seeing none, thank you, Director Bagley.
Thank you.
Now, School Department.
Save the best for last, right?
All right. For the record, Crystal DeGray, Chief Operating Officer. Sorry, Dr. Arndred. Sure.
All right, so looking at the school district trust funds, so we have 19 in total that are on the page. There should be 6 that I'm recommending that we go ahead and close. So the 6 that I would recommend that we close, because there is no balance, nor do we plan to utilize them in the future, would be 7072, school portable classrooms, 7075, 7562, 7564, 7566, and 8651. And I'll work with Dawn to go ahead and do the proper channels to get those 6 accounts closed. From a high-level standpoint, all of these trust funds were created, as you heard from the other departments, for a specific purpose. A couple high-level items, I guess I would go ahead and just point out. So 7070, which is the school deferred maintenance, and then 7073, which is school capital reserve fund. I'm not quite sure how the process works, but we could potentially combine those.
I think we should, because
Yes.
the monies that been allocated over the last 2 years have to be in that 73, because there's not that much in 77. And it's, when the Board of Aldermen specifically puts money towards school deferred maintenance, it's specifically for deferred maintenance only. So it should be clearly defined in whichever one. I would probably keep 7073, since most of the money's in that right now. I don't know if the wording needs to be changed, but just so we know how it can be expended. I know right now it's being expended.
Yes.
And you know it's being expended.
I do, yes,
So-
for sure.
So we just want to make sure that everybody's clear on just how it works.
Yeah, and I guess there could be, you know, when I first looked at these trust funds and just digging into them, you know, just some cleanup that we absolutely could do. I mean, the school deferred maintenance, we could go ahead and make some type of purchase and bring it forward for approval, and possibly zero out that account. Or I guess the other recommendation, again, would be to combine it with the school capital reserve fund.
I'm sure Mr. Smith can help you spend that.
Yes, I'm sure he could. Absolutely. So 7071, school retirement, this account was set up if there's any excess that we might need for retirements throughout the school. 7074, special education. So this was set up back in 2008, 2009, based off of my knowledge and research with my predecessor. This is, again, to be used only for special education expenses. So there's about $226,000 sitting in there. I do think it's an account we should leave open. 7076, vocational ed capital reserve, not a ton of money in there. There's 2,800, as of July 1st of 2024 is the balance I'm about to read. So there was $2,858 in there. That really could be used for our CTE program. It's not a ton of money. I would say let's go ahead and make a purchase.
I can give you history on that one.
Yeah, sure.
Particularly when we built the two new high schools. We put a lot of money into those type of funds, and we set up the special account so that when people pay tuition to come to Nashua for, whether it's the culinary arts, or it's the automotive, or the, whatever hairdressing is, all of those.
Cosmetology.
Those monies were to go into this account, so when new equipment had to be purchased, you had money to purchase it.
But we do have a special revenue account for our CTE program, and the majority of our tuition is going into our special, or the tuition that you're describing is going into our special revenue account, and then any equipment purchase is also coming out of our special revenue account. So for the CTE program, we have a special revenue account, and we also have this trust fund. As of the fund balance, as of March 31st of 2025, there's only $83 in that account. I would recommend to the CTE director that we spend that $83 and then go ahead and close that account, since we do have the special revenue account that we're operating out of. So the next one on my list is 7077. Again, this is related to the CTE team. My understanding is this actually was set up if like the cosmetology program or wanted to go ahead and charge for haircuts, similar if the automotive CTE program wanted to charge for oil changes. Again, there's about 13, based off of my notes, there's about $1,300 dollars in there. We have the CTE special revenue account. You know, my opinion would be, let's go ahead and spend these two accounts towards CTE. Let's get them cleaned up and closed.
You could give that recommendation to Dawn.
Yep. We will definitely work together to get these cleaned up and closed.
Culinary Arts used to serve lunches, and do they still do that?
No.
Used to have good food.
Still do.
The next one on my list, 7079, school utilities. So this was set up back a few years ago just for any excess related to school utilities. I would actually go ahead and leave that open at this point. I almost think of it as like an emergency account or a savings account for school utilities. Again, that is an expense that if Eversource decides to increase their rates, we do have some money there to utilize it. The next one is 7560, so school impact fees. My understanding here is this is for developments that are built within the city of Nashua. This is a fee that is charged that we do get as a school district. We work with the comptroller on an annual basis to go ahead and make an entry at the end of the year. My understanding from my predecessor in the research is we work with the comptroller to do this annually, and it's basically to reduce the tax rate. I understand, you know, as most folks are aware, there's a lot of developments that are popping up in Nashua. My recommendation would be to leave that open. The next one I have on my list is 7561, which is Stello Stadium improvements. Again, I would recommend that we leave this open. On an annual basis, BG does pay us $13,500. When we collect that money, that is where we are depositing it into this trust fund. And again, this trust fund was created for donations, contributions related to Stello Stadium. And we could only utilize this for any type of expenses.
Question on that one.
Sure.
We didn't have all the definition before, but it's saying 50% of the contributions and donations shall be used for repairs, replacements, and future improvements. The other 50% be used to make payments on Stello Stadium bonded debt. Does that include the new maintenance bond that we just undertook for the field?
Go ahead, Dr.
Yeah,
Andre.
we would have to research. I mean, obviously, this trust fund was established prior to the latest development, so we would have to go back to the legislation of how we would expend that.
That piece of legislation, I've read it about 3 or 4 times, and it's not very clear. And how it can be spent. And I believe there's about $300,000 in this account. Memory serves me.
Yeah. On my side, I'm seeing about 100,000 that's sitting in this account.
Okay. All right. And just one other question before Alderman Lopez. Is this the account that they bought the new scoreboard out of?
Yes, I believe so. Yep.
Alderman Lopez?
I think there were some questions at joint special about the contract being signed by an interim superintendent. Did we correct that? Is there like a current school board approved contract with BG?
That's not a budget item, that's a, well,
It's
it's
the
not an
item that's
expendable trust
funding this
fund, but
budget
it's-
though, right? That's where the fund from this, that's where the money from this fund comes from?
Well, yes, I guess it would be the use and the payment would go into here, so it is sort of related. So it's, at least my understanding, maybe you can correct me, Mario, that there is a new agreement that's floating through the system?
There has not been an updated contract as of yet. We've been in contact with the mayor's office over the last year and what direction do we want to go? But we haven't signed a new contract yet.
Just thinking it might be germane if we're figuring out whether it could be used to pay down a bond or anything like that. We don't, or if there's even going to be money coming into it.
Yeah,
No,
so-
the BG, I mean, if I may,
Go
Mr.
ahead.
Chairman, yeah, I mean, BG's willing to be a partner still, and so, and work in good faith, so the cost or their rental agreement has remained the same, but I think it's just, again, with staff partnership and with the language, but we will be in touch with legal on what that new contract looks like.
So I would assume, based on the calculation I saw in the old contract, the fee would go up because the numbers they were using for the field were far less than the $1 million we just spent to replace the field. So that's taken into account when they calculate how much they pay us every year. I mean, won't go up a huge amount, but to my understanding, Bishop Girton's already playing there, lacrosse. Right?
They are. So again, I think, again, in full transparency, BJ has been really good around the table, kind of going forward, and I think it's really from working with the mayor's office on what does that agreement look like and what's a reasonable, is it, I hate to put it in the other term of, is it like renting ice at Conway? Are you a partner, or are you actually, it's really like renting out a facility for the day, and, what's your overall contribution?
Yep.
So,
So I guess the answer is the new fee will go into this account.
All right, the next one on my list is 7563, School Athletics, ETF. So this account was established for contributions for the school department athletic expense. Any donations that are taken in is deposited, related to athletics, is deposited into this trust account, and this is used for usually non-operating expenses. Again, my recommendation would be to leave that open. This is an account that's actually managed very well by myself and the athletic director. The last one on the list is 7565, school-related programs. So this is besides the capital reserve fund. This is the trust fund that has the biggest balance. This is where any gifts or donations or contributions that come in related to school-related programs and activities is deposited here. The Board of Education, as well as myself, would make a recommendation to go ahead and spend those funds. This account, as of right now, has about $180,000 worth of Crotchet Mountain donations, and we're going to end up moving those funds into basically a grant related to Crotchet Mountain. So because the money came in as a lump sum, it was deposited here from a donation standpoint, and we will work with the comptroller to go ahead and move that. 7565, school-related programs.
Oh, okay, thanks.
And that is everything from the school
So-
district side.
All right, you've got one for National High School North Class ETF. and
Oh,
one for
sorry about
South.
that. Yep. So I missed those, I apologize. So 7570 and 7571, they're both school class accounts. I've been in contact with the school principals. We're doing a little bit of, especially for North, we're doing a little bit of investigation to see how long this 35,000 has been sitting in there. South has only $29 roughly, $30 in there. That could be expensed, and then we could decide if we want to leave it open or not. These accounts were created for when the graduating class does go ahead and move on. If they have not spent, my understanding is if they have not spent their full money, then we need to go ahead and move it for, I think it's 3 years, into a trust fund to give them the time to go ahead and make that decision on spending the funds.
Yeah, I think those were also for donations from the classes when they left.
Yes.
So, all right, and 7075, did we talk to that one? The Julia Ward Fund, I know that's expended.
Yes, I did. My recommendation would be to go ahead and close that fund.
Yeah, we used that, I was here when we established that, when Julia Ward was on the Board of Education, and she passed away, and monies were put aside originally for scholarships, and then it got amended to do a mural project, which is at the Amherst Street School. What's 7562?
So.
We're closing that one, right?
Yep, 7562, my recommendation would be to close that one.
Okay, and I don't know why the Hurricane Katrina Relief Fund came under the Board of Education, but I think that's got $0 in, and that's gonna close?
Yes, it does, and I agree with that.
All right, and we're closing 7566.
Yep, school technology fund, that is an account we don't utilize anymore.
Any questions for the school department? Alderman Senate.
Yes, I had a question on 7074, the special education fund.
Yep.
And so that one jumps out at me just because, I mean, I know the current balance in it right now of 231.6 isn't exactly, in the grand scheme of operating the school department, isn't life-changing, but it's significant enough for me to wonder, how is this fund, how does it grow? How do funds get in there? And then at what point is the decision made to sort of dive into that? Because we just saw through the Board of Education, and then it's come here to us here at the Board of Aldermen, sort of a contentious school budget this year. And a big portion of that is, well, how are we going to fund special education? We have certain spending mandates that we have to follow as dictated by the federal government and the state government. And we're seeing less state funds come down. So how do we bolster this account, and at what point do we go, we need to dip into that money?
Yep. So I think it's a fair question. So we also have a special revenue account that's related to special education. You know, I wouldn't be opposed to necessarily going ahead and basically spending the amount that's here related to special education, and then us, you know, eliminating the trust fund if we move forward with just keeping the special revenue account open. I think, you know, again, it was set up as like a reserve back in 2008, 2009 is my understanding. We started to see special education cost increasing. My understanding is there was about $150,000 that was put into this trust fund to open it. And, you know, year over year, based off of the research that I did, it just seems like really the reason it's grown is because of the interest. I think we tend to, are you trying to jump in? Okay. I think we tend to spend out of operating and special revenue first related to special education. I think what I've done with Dr. Andre's help is, you know, kind of step back. At the end of the day, in my opinion, it's all one budget. Just depends, is it coming out of special revenue, coming out of operating, or is it coming out of the trust funds?
Follow-up, Alderman Senate?
Yes, so that special revenue fund that you said is also earmarked for special education purposes.
Yep.
the funds that go into that, those funds that are received from the state or the federal government, as it were, or?
So,
Go ahead.
sorry.
You got it.
This is my wheelhouse. So special education, special revenue. The revenue that comes into that is tuition that we basically charge for some of our special education programs. So there's a Brentwood program.
Yep.
We also have a Signs of Learning program, which we are seeing a huge increase year over year as far as just interest in sending students from other districts to these programs. So that is how we generate revenue into the special revenue account. And then to offset that, there's expenses related to contract services or out-of-district tuition.
All right, thank you.
Sorry.
Alderman Clee?
Thank you. While I agree that it's nice to try to close some of these trust fund accounts and so on, if this was originally set up as kind of an emergency account and so on, I'd hate for us to close that if that's kind of like a, kind of the keep the money in the cupboard kind of type of thing, where the special revenue account is just that kind of money that we're getting through tuition and so on, and at the same time, it's still kind of budgeted money. It's money that we know is going to be coming in, and we have that. If an emergency comes in, that's finite. We don't have that. But this money, having this, I get concerned when I'm hearing you saying, well, we should spend it. It's like, what would you spend it on? I don't want you just to go out and spend it. Like, if you're going to spend $80 or $18, that would be fine. I was a little concerned even when you were talking about, I forget what the other one was, that there was a few $1,000s that you were talking about, spending that and closing that account out. I'm trying to find out where my notes are here. It was one of the accounts that you were talking about, because you said you had a revenue fund of that. Rather than trying to spend that, would it be wiser just to try to close that and put that somewhere else, where it could be used, maybe working with legal and saying, rather than just spending it for that program, seeing you already have a revenue account. And I wish I could read through my notes a little bit better and see where it was that I had said, if you remember which one it was. You had talked about two accounts. And spend to close. I think it might have been 7077. Is that the one? Yeah, the regional Voc Ed operating fund. I think you said there were a few $1,000s, and then before I look at the spreadsheet, where would you just spend that?
Yeah, so let me clarify, I guess, what I said to you. So I'm not just willy-nilly spending,
And I
right?
didn't mean to say it that way. I apologize for making it sound that way. To the public, I know you would not do that, and I apologize for making it
Yeah,
sound
and again,
that way.
these trust funds were set up for a specific purpose.
Right.
So there are specific items that we could only be purchasing, whether it's out of the CTE or, spending the money that's in special revenue, special education towards special education cost. So I would work with the departments to say, in CTE, what are some of the items that they need that we can spend these funds on that are appropriate because they have their special revenue account. For special education, I don't disagree with you that this is almost like an emergency account, right? I think as we've seen throughout the budget process, special revenue related to special education, and maybe this will come up, there is a substantial balance in that special education, special revenue account. I think we need to decide as a district, is this more of like an emergency account, and that's what trust funds, and that's what we want to leave it open for, which I don't think is a bad thing, but if we're trying to consolidate, we do have our special revenue account.
Follow up?
And this might be again to Dawn, to Ms. Enright. If we were to close that account rather than to try to spend it or use it, could we close that account and put that money into the special revenue account, or would that be inappropriate because it's not revenue? Just so that we would have one account versus two accounts.
Thank
That's just what I'm,
Thank you
Alright.
for the question, John Enright. You could not close it into a special revenue account.
Okay.
You know, spending it as directed
right,
would probably be the best way, or possibly combining it with one of the other trust funds that they have.
okay.
We could put legislation forward for that,
Okay.
but we couldn't put it into the special revenue.
May I just
Follow up?
Yeah, more just an opinion. I feel very protective of special education and special needs, and I like to see funds that are relegated to that stay, and for a rainy day. So personally, I like to see it stay, and if we have to have an extra trust fund, I would like to just see it stay there for that rainy day. Again, just my opinion. Thank you.
All set? Any other questions for education? Alderman Wiltshire.
I don't have a question, I just have something that might help. When you talked about the special education trust fund, you thought it may have been established in '08 or '09. But when you see our 0640, the 06 means it started in 2006.
Okay.
Just so, when you're looking stuff up, it's easier to find.
It'll save you a
If you
lot
know
of
what
work.
year it was.
Yes, absolutely.
Just clarification.
Thank you for that.
Sure, yeah, you
Any
bet.
other questions? I have one. How did you enjoy your first public hearing on the budget?
Go there.
Well,
Don't go there.
I think we as a school district and probably the other teams must have did a good job educating folks on what the overall budget request was, and I was,
You got this big book and you're ready to answer
I
every
was
question
ready.
that could possibly come up, and no questions.
I wasn't sure what to expect, so I wanted to make sure I was prepared for sure.
That's why I called you the next day and you weren't there. I said, oh my God, she's expecting all kinds of questions and got none.
Yeah. All a learning process, it's been good.
Oh,
It's
thank you
not
very
like you
much.
didn't have your difficult meetings, though. I mean,
Yeah.
True.
You had your own public hearing on the budget. That was, all right.
Excellent, see you
Thank you
tomorrow.
very much.
Thank you.
All right.
We'll be in touch.
All right, do you have any closing remarks?
Thank you, Chair. Dawn Enright, Treasurer, Tax Collector. So with all this discussion, we have talked about a lot of them that we would like to consider to close. So I will work with the departments and with coming up with legislation to combine or close or do cypre, and I'll be able to give a report back as to where we're at. If you have any questions or comments or suggestions, I welcome them. Or if you'd like to support some of this legislation, I would love to hear from you.
Alderwoman Kelly?
I would very happily support some of those pieces of legislation. But I do want to just bring us back to the beginning of this. We asked you if there were any surprises. We're going into budget wrap-up. Is there any found money in here that we could consider as we're doing a very tight budget?
Thank you for that question. When you're working with trust funds, I understand the tight budget and the wanting to find money to be able to utilize to offset. This was a very good exercise for us all to educate us on what's out there, what's available, and what we can utilize these funds for. I would recommend that we take this information and move forward, and not for just one budget. Let's look to future budgets. Are there funds here that are not being utilized that year over year are generating enough revenue that could offset the budget year over year? The last thing we would want to do is utilize some of these funds for this year and create a hole for next year. So that's the advice that I would give. There are a lot of funds here that can be utilized for different programs and so forth. But let's think long-term. If there is something that we could utilize, let's make sure that we can use it year over year, that it produces enough revenue year over year.
Also, to change any of these is gonna take legislation, and that's a 6 to 8 week process. By then, the budget's gonna be complete, closed. So, Alderman Clee?
Thank you. One of the things I heard when we were talking to the library, that they have a number of items where they can't touch the principal, they can only use the revenue. If we kind of had, and I know this is probably a burden on you, but we kind of had an idea as to what is the principle of some of these trust funds, and what is the revenue of it, so that we didn't create that hole. We knew what some of the money is being earned on it. We could see that happening. We would have a better feeling as to, don't touch that, just so that we could see year after year what's being earned on it, so that maybe not this budget year, as was pointed out by our chair, but that we could see in future budgets that maybe when they're trying to fund, so when Public Works is looking to fund something, we can say, well, you do have this trust fund. Do you think you could use this without touching the principal? You've had some revenue that's going to be doing this, rather than trying to bond or something of that nature. Just to kind of give maybe Public Works, the Board of Aldermen, Finance, and so on, kind of that feeling. It kind of put a little light bulb over my head when Library had mentioned that they have some that can't touch the principal. It will kind of help us save some of those trust funds too. The bigger ones, not necessarily those little $20,000 ones, or, you know, I don't want to create a lot of work for you, but.
Understood. Thank you for the question. If you look at page 5 of the expenditures, these are your permanent funds. And a permanent fund is a fund that you cannot touch the principal. And if you go to the city website under the financial statements and look at the detailed financial statements for the trust funds, the permanent funds will show you what the principal balance is.
Thank you.
Okay, all set? Oh, Alderman Wiltshire?
I would like to thank Ms. Enright for the hard work she's done on this. It's a lot of work, it's a lot of trust funds, and it's all over the place. I mean, it's not just simple, this was set up for this, this is how, I mean, they're all so intricate in their own right. So thank you for all the work you've done.
My pleasure. Took a village.
As I mentioned, Alderman Tebow, I've been asking for something like this for, seems like forever. And I fully, after having all these discussions with you, know exactly how much work this is when you have all these other things on your plate as well, like the budget.
Every day on my vacation.
Yeah. So thank you for all that, all the work you've done on this, and I think we now have a much better handle on this, and moving forward, we can clean this up, and going forward, it'll be easier to manage, I hope. All right. All right.
Alderman Dowd?
Yes, Alderman Kelly? Alderman Kelly?
Thank you. I also wanted to thank you for the work that you did, and I just want to put a fine point on this and say that it sounds like a lot of what we heard was there are opportunities where we've opened all these little ones and we'll kind of start shifting to a bigger, less strings attached types of funds. I imagine that is the strategy that coming out of your office, but I think we've seen someone has to go put flowers on my grave, and the rest of the money is untouchable. So I'm hoping that the city in general will start to have those kind of conversations when people want to bequest or donate. Fewer hurdles to use the money is always critical for us.
Okay.
Thank you.
Again, thank you. So, moving on, communications?
There are none.
Unfinished business?
There is none.
New business resolutions?
There are none.
New business ordinances?
There are none.
We are taking the budget off the table this evening, so
Don't we have to put it back on the table?
public what?
We never took it off.
We didn't take it off.
No, because we weren't doing anything directly budget related.
Okay.
No public, so there's no comment. General discussion and remarks by Alderman. Seeing none. Alderman O'Brien.
Does the chairman like to make a motion to adjourn?
Motion is to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. We're adjourned at 9:29 PM.